It is just so hard when there's no through-line character, and also Magic fans hate through-line characters. They hate to have a main character, and they hate to not have a main character as soon as it's a year past.
Poor Jace, can't catch a break. Good morning, everyone. It's me, Cal, back again with another interview here on the Herald's Horn. This week, to launch off our first ever theme month, it's Vorthos Month, I am joined by the one and only Cary, member of the Vorthos cast, Magic the Gathering archivist, and Vorthos extraordinaire generalized. They join me today to talk about how to get into the Magic the Gathering story and also why that could be such a hard pursuit. We also talk about their website, which focuses on archiving the Magic the Gathering story and doing its best to make it more accessible, giving you what you need to know, giving you jump-in points, and also giving you massive tools to kind of delve around in things. It's a great conversation. I'm sure you will love it. Let's get into it. And welcome to yet another Herald's Horn interview. This week, stepping into the horn and kicking off our very first theme month, Vorthos Month, it is the one and only Cary Thomas. I've already introduced them. Cary, welcome into the horn.
Thank you for having me.
We are here today for me to pick your brain about perhaps one of the most wicked problems in Magic the Gathering, which is, how does one get into the Magic story? Because, I mean, surely it's just as simple as just reading the most recent Tarkir story, right, Cary?
I mean, you can. That's an approach some people take.
Well, what is an approach that someone that... Because I was reading the Tarkir story. I think this is kind of the Tarkir story is the first story I've read in a long time, and the Tarkir story was really hitting for me. But that is, I think, because I do actually have a lot of history with some of the characters present, like Sarkhan and Jace and Narset and some of the other people who show up later in the story. And I think that would fall a little flat for many other people. But Cary, you, as someone who have been so involved with the Magic the Gathering story for so long, what approach would you take?
Not that involved.
I know. Look. Okay. Look.
I don't touch it. I just support it from the outside.
Involved from the outside, yeah. Involved in caring about it, etc., etc. Involved in the larger Vorthos community, perhaps. Where would you recommend that someone start? If they know like absolutely nothing, where are we starting?
Oh, if you know absolutely nothing, probably with the card game.
Well, look.
I will say, card game is the best hook you have for the rest of everything. It is the primary product, and the story has always been this secondary product that just kind of runs alongside it. So,
given that someone already plays the card game, where would you maybe recommend that someone starts to look?
Are they in the 75% who don't know what a planeswalker is? Because that's another thing. Like, there are so many... Like, legitimately, that is kind of the barrier here, is that...
I think we can start with, if someone is invested enough in Magic the Gathering to be listening to the Herald's Horn podcast.
Yeah. I don't want to, like, boil it down to just your audience, so that's sure.
That's fair. We can start larger than my audience, then.
Because, like, every single time I think about structuring the question, you have to understand that there are planes in the multiverse, and all these things are separated for most of Magic's story, not recently, but most of it. And then there are planeswalkers, and they have sparks. You really don't need the sparks information, but it's like kind of the branding of everything. So you have to like get those core tenets down. But assuming they are familiar with all of those things, really, it's kind of the perplexing problem right now of, you can advocate for people to start with any set. And there is currently a 3-year story arc going on, and we just finished up year 2 of it. It is kind of like 3.25 years now that they kicked the Lorwyn down the road, but like, we get the idea of what's happening. Once people are going to recommend you start with the beginning of the year, which in this case was Bloomburrow, because it gives you most of Jace's arc that is currently happening. But you could also start with 1 year before that with Kellen in Wilds of Eldraine, and that kind of sets up the idea of Omen paths for the most part, like the idea that these are traversable by non-Planeswalker characters, and we're not necessarily always going to be focused on a Planeswalker cast at this point. But it really depends on the person, is how I've judged it, because those two answers are very, very good for people who really, really care about the card sets that are coming out as they're playing them. And card sets that have come out in the last 2 years, if they have jumped onto playing Magic or returned to Magic within those 2 years. But like, my sister started getting into Magic Story because she had been playing on Magic Arena, and she started with The Brothers War, which is not The Brothers War, the novel by Jeff Grubb, not the
not
the Brothers War set.
Relatively recent.
Yes. And wholly disconnected from modern Magic story outside of kind of the recursion of the Phyrexians as they kind of wove it into their set release structure during that new Phyrexian arc. However, really good book. Like, that is the one thing that I think is critically important for people, is that Magic story has never been consistently good. And that's something we have to accept as Magic story fans, because as much as there is story directors and narrative leads and individual authors who will pour their heart and soul into it, there are people who say, but maybe we could sell books. And that was kind of a turning point in the community where it's like, no, story isn't this immortal beast that will keep perpetually moving and gaining a community and everything. When somebody says that they want to squeeze money out of it, they will try to squeeze money out of it, and it can kill the community if it's not done correctly. Because I think that there probably is a good portion of the Magic story audience and Magic playing audience that would pay for a novel. Whether that novel gets proper editing and proper like thought put into it, and where they're going to start novels is a whole other deal.
Yeah, we went through the novel arc. The novel, our short-lived reanimation of the novel arc has unfortunately came and gone. It's already basically ancient history at this point. Was that 2019?
2019. Then pretty much dead on arrival by 2020 because Theros Beyond Death cancellation. And then I think you get one more lingering after that where they actually delivered the e-novella, but maybe Ikoria. Yeah, Ikoria.
So if someone was looking at it right now, the answer is maybe jump in at Bloomburrow, maybe jump in at Tarkir, maybe
just wait for Edge, because maybe there will be a significant jumping on article that Magic Story produces. That's kind of the other thing, is that the responsibility for getting people into the Magic Story ecosystem isn't comparative to other avenues of Magic interests. Like, when you're interested in Magic content online, you can just kind of look it up and like dive right into whatever podcast or video or anything that you want to enjoy. When you think about the Pro Tour Dream or any kind of pro play environment, they kind of have linear paths for where you're supposed to follow from. And those are provided by Wizards because there has to be something feeding upwards into their top tier level of play. With Magic Story, it is a free-for-all where there are just two disconnected spheres of Magic Story being published and Magic fans who enjoy the story, and there isn't like a tether where they're like, you should get on point or you should get on board by this point to be able to enjoy it. They've tried loosely guiding people with this 3-year arc where they're like, hey, it's all leading to this big Strixhaven set that will come out in 1.5 years or so. However, that's not a linear through line. Like, even when you're consuming Bloomburrow to Tarkir, which is the past year of stories, Bloomburrow doesn't have Jace in it, but has Rao looking for Jace. And by Tarkir, it is all about Jason, his ultimatum. It is like, you don't really get, you're not following a main character throughout the stories like you were with Kellen in year one. So it's kind of harder to get people to pay attention for better word. It's a difficulty, and I think Magic Story probably has the opportunity to simplify that. However, I've been impatient with official efforts, so I've just like started doing stuff on my site where I'm like, here's a where to start guide. Are you interested in the most recent stuff and only the most recent stuff? Like, here's your fastest way to get on board with it. Are you interested in comics? Cool, there are more of those coming. Are you interested in only the world building stuff? Cool, here's all the world building. Because like, in reality, when you talk about people being into Magic Story, they're into it for all weird reasons. Like, not to say that like the core audience who is enjoying this, the Magic Story as an episodic serialized fiction is like the default. But there are people who pop in and out because they're like, oh, I only care about Abzan, so I'm only going to read the Abzan side story because it only concerns what I think about the Abzan clan, and specifically like with my fan walker or with my D&D campaign that I'm doing, that I have like fans set up on Tarkir. Like, there's a lot of different avenues, and it's hard to find like a singular answer that is like best fit for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And complicating it all really too is that it's not like, even like, I think there are other games that have tons of lore that have kind of done a better job of publishing more of it, making it more accessible, keeping a through line. I would guess that a major problem of even where to tell people to start or whatever, depending on what they want or whatever, is the fact that like the very basics of the Magic multiverse have kind of been overhauled at several different points now.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, everything we made before this, go over there, not real anymore.
Yeah. There was the mending where everything got upended, and then more recently, desparking and the advent of Omen Paths, where it's like, hey, how do I tell people that Planeswalkers are the main characters without being like, and Planeswalkers can travel between worlds? And it's like, well, everybody else can do that too. So they have lost some of that specialness. I don't think it's... I was very, very sour on it at first. Like, incredibly sour, where I was like, I don't think that Planeswalkers mean anything at this point. And
yeah,
it's still... Yeah. They're still keeping around the roster. Like, you saw the Tarkir story. You know who's involved with that. It's Planeswalkers and recently desparked Planeswalkers. And there's a lot of narrative theming that goes into the decision to despark Planeswalkers, and a lot of potential still left between that and the Omen Paths, where I'm excited to see where it's headed, but horrible to explain to people like, you should still care about Sarkhan because he used to have not creature cards. Like, that was the big thing.
You should care about Sarkhan because he used to be a Planeswalker.
Yeah.
And you are one of the 25% that knows what that means.
Oh boy. Like, how do you get through War of the Spark, one Planeswalker in every booster pack, and not have above 25% recognizing these characters? But it's also, to be fair, they're talking about this mingled mess of the game concept of a Planeswalker card, and then Planeswalkers as an in-universe concept, and I'm confident there are people who know one and not the other in both directions. Like, there are story fans who probably don't play Magic that much and maybe like keep track of the cards but like only play kitchen table, and then the vice versa. There are people who play a lot of Magic, know every single Planeswalker, still don't know that they move between worlds.
It's so difficult because like a trading card game is not a very good storytelling medium.
That has been WotC's harp to play for the longest time. They have continued since Origins was the most recent push for that, where they were like, you have to understand it's difficult for us when people are opening booster packs and they're not able to see the story in order. And that's kind of where story moments, like the story spotlight cards, first came up. But for the most part, it's like, I don't know. I see it as two entirely separate issues because I am somebody who can consume only the story and none of the cards, or consume all of the cards and none of the story. And I've done that at multiple points in the past decade of playing Magic, where it's like, I don't really care for this one. I'll skim it.
I'm not going to read this. But
I won't say which ones because I don't think it's indicative of the author's ability or anything. I think it is me not being sold on the world, where I'm like, eh. And it picked up real fast once they kind of got an idea of what their leadership and what their direction would be recently.
Yeah, it's like now that there's actually one person kind of driving the ship a little bit more, it's working out a little bit more. We're in the Roy Graham era? Is that where we are now?
If he wants his name attached to it, then yes. If not, then...
Well, I am labeling it the Roy Graham era.
When Jenna and Ken and all of their friends were largely in charge of it as of Tarkir to Magic Origins, they released a new article called A New Era. Wonderful, because it made it very, very clean for people to talk about, like, hey, there was before, this previous era, and then there's a new era. And, like, I think keeping game developers' names out of it is an advantage, but hey, if they want it, feel free.
Yep. Okay. Sure. So, in the vein of what I was talking about a second ago, Magic has changed so many times. The leadership has changed a lot of times. The authors working on it have changed a lot of times. We went through the very long novel era where a lot of the story you could get in a book that came in your fat pack. Cool. And now we're in the era of web fiction. How is the story published these days?
Very burst fire. That is the nice way, because we had multiple iterations of web fiction in the past. Some of them were weekly on a specific day of the week, and that meant if there were 12 chapters of story, you were getting 12 weeks of story drop. That is absurdly not viable in today's ecosystem, where there can be a Tarkir finale, and then an hour later there's a secret lair drop, and people are posting the secret lair drop more than they're posting the Tarkir finale story. Like, that is, we're just moving at a faster pace where more pieces of the pie are being claimed per day, and hard to keep attention in that way. But yeah, it's all delivered via web fiction for the most part. There will be exceptions in the future, I'm sure. I'm confident that they'll try to do, well, they're going to try to do comics again. We'll find out if those are in main continuity or not, and if people are going to kind of be attracted to those or not. But that Magic TV show, baby, let's go. We'll eventually get there. There will be, there's been games and other adaptations in the past where it's like, clearly the cards are different from the published web fiction, and the published web fiction is different from whatever trailer adaptation there would be, and that kind of dissonance will always exist. But what people are going to pay attention to is how they're telling the main story, and that main story is currently web fiction released usually in a week and some change, because hovers around the 10 to 12 stories maximum, so they can usually do mix of main, mix of side stories, one per day, and be done with it by Tuesday the next week,
when the actual spoilers start.
Yes.
Yep. And then in like, for example, this time around has been 5 side stories and 6 main stories. Some of the other ones have been like 3 side stories and 7 main stories, or, kind of just depend on whatever mix works. I have really enjoyed the side stories for Tarkir. It's fun to check in with all the clans and all that kind of stuff. Fun thing to do. Nice time.
It is nice. Like, side stories are one of those things that as soon as you remove them, people get extremely grumpy, because they served a million different purposes over the years. They were the commander deck commander slots for a while, like Zendikar Rising, Kaldheim, when they didn't really have much direction but were getting back onto the web fiction bandwagon. And then now they're just like, some of Magic's best fiction gets told in these short stories that are basically, as far as we know, not as heavily directed or heavily edited as the main stories, because the main stories have to hit plot point A that's shown on the card, plot point B, paste that
shown on another card. Yeah, exactly.
But you can leave things unresolved in a side story. You can leave things in a worse state than they were, and you can have like emotional, dare I say, literary fiction in short side stories that don't have as much constraint besides that they show a character.
Some of them have even just been like very slice of life-esque. It's just like,
boy, people love their slice of life.
Not Cary, conflicts.
The Ravnica Allegiance, and I think, is it Ravnica Allegiance, Guilds of Ravnica? Is that the correct order of those two?
Guilds was first. Guilds of Ravnica, then Ravnica.
Those two had web fiction, basically the last hurrah of side story web fiction, because the main story was being pushed off onto this novel line that they were trying to launch. And those ones still acclaimed to this day. Everybody loves them. Unanimous praise. And it's just like, I love when authors just kind of get the freedom to do their own thing. And they've done that since the beginning. They had anthology novels back in the beginning of Magic where people clearly took like a very silly thing that was like, how do these two cards interact? Or like, what do we know about Mon's Goblin Raiders? And just wrote 10,000 words about it because they could. And they had the time and ability to.
And I do really wish that we had more of that in today's modern story. Like, the side stories are, much like you said, like I am a lapsed story fan. I was a pretty invested story fan for a while, less so now. Miraculously, I fell off around War of the Spark. Go figure. And now, and I'm checking back in. The Tarkir is the first one I've paid a lot of attention to in a while, and the side stories are the best part because you can do whatever you want with them. You don't have to, like, if you want to, you can't just read the Absian story and you can be like, cool, and move on with your life. It's not attached to anything else, but it makes Magic's world a bigger, more lived-in world, and I think that is a big advantage that could be leveraged more for some of the stories.
Yeah. It's clearly in demand enough to the point where when they were doing the Magic comics at multiple points, like every single Homelands, like the original Homelands is basically the original Homelands comic by like D.G. Chichester way back in the day. Like that is essentially
with Rebecca Guay art.
Yeah. And it's just like, it is a main story, but it's like a side story to the card set that they were selling you. And it just like hits everything that you could possibly want. And there's a dozen or so anthology short stories from across Magic's many attempts at anthology novels where it's just like, hey, I like this one story from this one book and this one story from this other book. Like, these two are hits, but you would never be advocating for somebody to be like, go buy Colors of Magic, this 30-year-old paperback, so that you can read this one story because I think it's good. With Magic web fiction, you can just be like, hey, I thought this fucking Abzan story was banger. I'm going to send it to my friend.
Here's a nice 4,000 words. Here you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And just like the shareability of it now makes it way more attractive. They're obviously not taking a profit by this point, like, because they're not selling a Magic story product. However, that's kind of the cost.
It is a way of it. We're like, we're in a weird era where I guess that since there's no profit incentive, it's the profit incentive within of creating this stuff is making the set dressing of a card game a little bit larger.
People appreciate it. You saw Theros Beyond Death didn't get a story. People were not pleased about that. It is.
The set felt a lot more hollow to me, kind of as a result. Yeah, it's like we're back in Theros. What's going on? Elspeth got out, I guess. Somehow Elspeth returned.
You have the saga card for it, and that's good enough for you because we're going to push a story summary out on the web. But people want... I think the secondary access for the side stories is truly the world building freaks who are way too into Magic's worlds that it has established over the years, because it's like people want Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, people want Strixhaven, Curriculum of Chaos or whatever, people want Tarkir, A Planeswalker's Guide to Tarkir. They love these things. They love them. They love the worlds arguably more than they love the characters, which I think is a point that Kess always brings up on Blue Sky or the equivalent. It is hard to understate, like, a lot of their branding truly is the worlds, and it feels way easier to get into a world than it does a fully fledged story. Because how are you going to explain somebody like the beginning of Bloomburrow? Well, Ral is mad at Jace. Why is Ral mad at Jace? Oh, because Jace deceived him in the set before and like deceived this entire group. Why did he do that? Well, because he's traumatized from this war that happened 3 sets before that. It's just...
And why did that war happen? Well, because of Nicobolus trying to do all this stuff that started all the way back in for the full context of, you need to go all the way back to Ixalan.
Yeah, like, are we going to go back to Karn dripping oil on
No,
New Phyrexia accidentally or Mirrodin?
No, we're going back to Warzil's story.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody needs continuity to start from the beginning. There is a good chunk of players who want to read Magic's story in chronological order, and I try to enable them while also advising you to really not do that because it's not worth it.
Yep.
But
have you read all of Magic's story in chronological order, Cary?
I have read a good amount of it and skimmed also good amount of it, because at the end of the day, like, not every story has hit for me. I gotta catalog them for my site though, so I just, gotta do what I gotta do.
So, Cary, I guess we've talked about your site. So you have mentioned your site several times. What is your site?
My site is mtglore.com. It feels so dirty to plug it, It's a Magic story search engine.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it's useful for this conversation.
Yeah. It's a Magic story search engine. It has a few other tools on it. I'm always in the process of working on it, but it is a hobby project. So, like, I don't have all of Tarkir's stories on there yet. I probably will by the time that this podcast comes out. I work at it on my own pace because I'm not funded by anybody.
Yeah,
so I just
doing it for the love of the game.
Yeah, but that has 30 years of Magic story, 30 plus 32 by this point of Magic story archived in a searchable form so that you can search by Planeswalker plane, non-Planeswalker characters, so search by whatever commander you like, author, filters for pre-mending, post-mending, filters for story versus lore/world building is what I call it, but it's essentially like Planeswalkers guides, flavor articles, things that don't fit into being something where Cal can see it in the search results and click on it and expect to read a story, and then it's like this weird meta article about how they flavored these 5 guilds of Ravnica or whatever. But I just try to make it as organized as possible because spoiler alert, I use the site way more than anybody else. This is
your own personal tool.
I have a dedicated user base, but it is like essentially the Magic story community online is not overly active on social spaces. It is active, but by comparison with any other segment of the Magic player base, it is horribly outsized, and it's been that way for decades. It's the reason that they stopped selling novels, because they weren't putting them in fat packs to be able to subsidize the cost, and then once they started selling them direct to players, it's like, hey, not that many people are going to go out of their way to purchase this thing. So it's like we're in a perpetually small community, and it's grown massively at multiple points, most notably like as they were wrapping up the new era going into Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan. Massive growth. War of the Spark, arguably a pretty massive growth moment for people being interested in the finale, not a retention moment in the moments after that finale. And then more recently, everything basically, I want to say loosely since Kaldheim, you've kind of had growth as people got interested in the new Phyrexia arc and following the Praetors across plane. And that was just a rebuilding of trust, because the audience's trust had been broken. And not to boil it down too simply, but Magic story does not have a good reputation. When you look at the grand sum of things, you have novels that were not successful, novels that were successful, novels that, like, for the most part, didn't justify their own existence by the time that the development timelines were aligning for what kind of story details that were being included. Quest for Karn doesn't include the Praetors. That was kind of towards the tail end of Disconnection, where it's like, hey, maybe we should be rethinking how we're delivering the main story to Magic fans. But like, none of them are horrible jumping on points. To wrap back to the beginning, like, you can go into any Magic novel that you want to, and I like fully encourage people to explore whatever story they want through that site, because I try to make it like as accessible as possible. A lot of them are on archive.org, wink wink. Like, you can go read the Brothers War right now if you are really like taking that recommendation and saying, a lot of people are saying this is good, I can read this novel right now. Or I can go, I don't have it linked to on my site, but there's YouTubers who have done audio versions of the stories, and it's like the fan content policy allowed them to do it. So they have audio versions of the Brothers War, the Thran, all the heavy hitters from that era. And it just, what's most important to me is first impressions. I don't want people to be misguided thinking that they have to start with Bloomburrow or Duskworn or whatever set is coming out right now and kind of feel lost in the weeds because they have no idea who Tyvar, Kaido, any of these characters are that they're seeing. And so providing as much context for them without having to write out personal bios for, here's the Wanderer, here's what you should know about the Wanderer prior to jumping into Duskmourn's story. That's a lot of work, and I understand why Wizards of the Coast doesn't do it, and like the Magic story team isn't able to do it. However, at a certain point when you're building up to a 3-year story arc, I do think there's some obligation to be like,
yeah, there's some level of like, if you want people to be able to, who have started playing Magic in the last 6 months, like there's always a large pile of people who are recently more invested than they used to be. You need some way to let people know, hey, there's a lot of context here. Here's your little context.
And it feels horrible telling somebody like, hey, you're interested in the thing that I'm enjoying right now. How about you go read 5 stories per set generously, times 4 sets in the year, times however much word count in those stories, times 2 because you have to go back to the beginning of Kellen's arc to understand the impacts of Omen Paths. Like, it feels horrible to be like, go read the entirety of like this hundreds of thousands of words of back reading in order to understand why the Phyrexian War mattered, and then go from there to the present, and then maybe you can hang out with me by the time that you finish catching up reading. It's just not reasonable.
And by the time you've finished reading all of that, there will be a set and a half more of lore for you to read.
But one of those sets is Universes Beyond now, so fine.
Look, I wasn't going to say it. I was going to say that, oh, look at the bright side. You have a bit extra time to catch up.
You get a little bit of a break. So that's kind of the issue, is that the momentum for existing people is strong, but getting more people into that existing crowd feels like a relentlessly uphill battle. And I think that there are opportunities. I've tried to make opportunities where I'm like, hey, are you interested in Foundations? I put out a Foundations card story portal where it was like, here's a whole bunch of Foundations cards. If you click on it, it takes you to a story or lore article related to that card. And it's like just a fun way to dive into things without having to necessarily do a billion words of back reading in order to understand the context of it. But what I've been recently doing is quick start guides, which are just like, here is 300 to 400 words, basics of the multiverse, here's what's going on in the set, here's the bare minimum you need to know about the characters of the story, go fucking read. Like, there, you will have questions, assuredly. You won't understand what, like, the purpose or motivation of Jace's plan is fully, but it's not necessary in the same way. Like, your priority is that you want to start reading the story. So I'm trying to give you this tool to start reading the story as fast as possible so that you're not, there's not a barrier of a dozen previous stories that you have to read before you feel like you're comfortable entering this arena.
How long have you been doing the quick start guides? You did one for Turkey, you did one for Aether Drift.
Just those two. I'm going to keep doing them going forward because they've been remarkably appreciated. So I won't say successful because I don't know. Like, I know how many clicks I send to the Magic website. I don't know how many of those clicks load to the page and scroll a little bit and say I'm intimidated by the word count. Or
sure.
But like I'm making it as easy as possible to get everything that you could possibly need for wanting to do this specific goal. Like, it's the same thing as anything else where it's like, you don't need to be reading sideboard guides if your idea is like, I'm going to net deck this and run it in a standard tournament. Like, you just kind of brain off, coast through as much as possible. You're not dedicated to holding that deck for months to come or like living with it. You're just trying to get your results and get out as fast as possible. However, there are people who linger in standard for multiple years and just like know every deck that's coming in or out of the format, and it's like hard to be like, you should understand these 6 decks that you will go up against just so that you can play this one thing at FNM rather than just playing at FNM and like seeing how you do.
And in that vein, if you do want to dive all the way into the Magic the Gathering story, there is the chronological order button on mtglore.com.
That's my worst enemy. Yeah, I shouldn't have put that there, but you know,
there's only 1,270 entries, so get started.
Since it's trying to take a very comprehensive approach to stuff, there's stuff that's in there that counts for an entry that isn't like 1,200 word article or a 6,000 word story. Well, however,
some of these are even like, here is a link to an entire Magic the Gathering set on Scryfall.com.
Yes, because it's like the flavor. Yeah, that's another thing where it's like, how do you even capture the flavor text of the cards for the people who want to be completionists and like look for this character that's only mentioned on an Antiquities flavor text and never mentioned again. Like, I don't love that scope creep for my site. However, I appreciate that those people are wanting those kind of features, so I'm like slowly adding that stuff where it's like, hey, maybe if I play this kind of game for a very, very long time, then I can have pretty much everything that I would need and a way to expedite these kind of things. Because, like, spoilers, I don't look at every single card in the set to document their flavor text. Like, there's faster ways to collate the information than necessarily hand reviewing everything. However, like, a good amount of that site was hand reviewed information, so gotta record all 50 characters in this oddball trilogy sequel, you know?
No, you don't, Cary. I am releasing you. You are free. You are free.
Like, it's in a similar vein to the wiki. The wiki doesn't have an excellent where to start guide. Also go to mtg.wiki. Like, that's my free plug for them. Please do that instead of going to the fandom one. Course correct, and also Fandom Wiki Buddy exists. Everybody, that's the fastest way for me to plug that. But the wiki doesn't have an especially efficient way to onboard people, and it is just so hard when there's no through-line character. And also, Magic fans hate through-line characters. They hate to have a main character, and they hate to not have a main character as soon as it's a year past.
Poor Jace can't catch a break.
People are really crazy about Kellen now. as much as they were hating Kellen before, they say, I think I would have liked to see Kellen like continue to travel around the multiverse. And it's like, would you? Because I think if they did that for one more set, a lot of y'all
people would have lost their minds. Yeah. Has Kellen just disappeared post Outlaws? Did he go home?
Yeah, exactly. It's that he's on Thunder Junction hanging out with Amelia. Like that's how so many Magic stories end, where it's like, where's Sarkin now? Well, he got thrown into a dragon storm. Maybe he'll show up later. Maybe he'll be on Tarkir by the next time we revisit. Yep. So be it.
Okay. Yeah, I did forget even that Kellen was kind of just kind of a main character. He just kept popping up around some different spots. And then Kellen was like, well, time to hang out on Annie's ranch. Time to...
He was like the Arc 1 tool in a similar way to how Jace's plot was the Arc 2 tool. Arc Year 2, I should say. Because it all feeds into this mega arc that will eventually come to fruition in 2027, I think now. But it's just really, really hard to get people... connecting people with the resources is only half the battle when their awareness of Magic story as a whole is so underserved by comparison. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities to do that when you're churning out dozens, hundreds of secret layers a year. You can maybe throw a Magic story one a bone. You can do it for Boom Comics. You can do it for Dark Horse Comics that are coming up in this future series. You can do it for Brandon Sanderson. Please do it for Brandon Sanderson when you're releasing Children of the Nameless in print. But I just, they have these marketing avenues that they never let the story have access to. Should there be story on Arena? There's kind of been in the past where they've had teases of it around War of the Spark, actually. So you might not have experienced it directly when you dipped out, but I think they had a mini story campaign type thing where it was just based on some arbitrary campaign value that wasn't necessarily one-to-one with the duels experience in the past, but did give you campaign loading screen type information.
That's something, I guess.
Wow, there's so much that they could be doing that they don't do, and I don't think that I'm correct being hey, you should do secret layers and you should plug it in Arena and you should be shouting it from the rooftops every single day. However, they could be doing significantly more, and the more resources that they dedicate to it. We had a massive bump in resources alone. Just the Magic Story podcast and some of the world building teams at different points have just hopped on to record audio stories, and they released that as part of the Magic Story podcast now, which is otherwise a pretty commentary focused podcast. But yeah, the two hosts of that podcast, they've had world building people pop in for recordings before, but it's nice to have one more option for people to explore, and that one more option is audio. And audio is just faster for me personally. It's faster for a lot of people, but they don't have a full enough commitment to it as a official production for the side stories to get that. And it's how do Magic story fans shout at Wizards to be hey, we want you to hire we want you to hire more people or pay people for their time in order for them to record side stories in addition to it, because I would love to listen to the side stories.
Yeah, the side stories. Yeah,
whereas
definitely.
I can only read those in text right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not. I won't say they're doing absolutely nothing to help people get into Magic story. But that podcast thing alone, audio versions of the stories, massive, unbelievably massive.
I know they've said that the Magic Story podcast is supposed to be the relatively accessible, easy way to get into it. Do you agree with that? Is it a good, if barring anything else, listening to the Magic Story podcast, will that kind of get you there?
I would advocate for the Magic Story podcast for absolute beginners, because they do a very, very good way of introducing characters and giving recaps that, frankly, enfranchised people absolutely cannot. Like, they're Wizards employees, so they're like possibly the most enfranchised in this scale, but they have that teaching ability that actually is like, hey, what is the context zero person doing? In the same way I try to do it for the quick start guides, because like trying to emulate that a little bit in a faster way. But damn, like, it's just wonderful to actually see these minute improvements in how Magic story is delivered and how people can get into it.
Yeah, and I think it is like, I think I'm a lot more optimistic now about the Magic story than I like was 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it is slowly improving. There's so much more they could do. Like, I would kill for there to be one current set agnostic side story per quarter. I would kill for that. It's just like, come on!
They've heard that call so often is the thing, and it's not like they're lacking material that feeds into the story to do that.
Yeah.
It 100% feels like either lacking budget or lacking resources to, like, adequately direct those kind of stories. And direct is a weird word, but like, because they're acting as editors and also acting as commissioners in this case. However, like, it works.
I do wish that there was more of a appetite internally for something more like how 40K does things, where like they have an extremely large world, they have a lot of published content of various quality, but it is because they're a lot more willing to just say, hey person, here's something kind of interesting, do whatever you want.
And there are so many angles. There's the absolute sickos who love Arena, the very first Magic the Gathering novel. They're like, I want more Magic spellcasting and like analog to the game within the story. And it's like, I think you could do that. I think you could do that in fan fiction if you were very, very dedicated. But like, a lot of the people who are wanting this kind of content don't necessarily do fan fiction, and the people who are doing fan fiction are more invested in character stories and stuff. So it's like, I think there could be a very interesting adaptation of a Magic story that goes along those lines, where it's like, hey, it's just an old school Planeswalker duel. This one's for the very self-indulgent people who want to see like ultra referential Magic stuff. But like, the comics kind of do that sometimes, and it's just, so many people want so many different things out of Magic story, and I think that they can deliver on a good number of them. However, they're doing a fucking bang up job for what they have to focus on right now, which is like telling a compelling story and getting this 3-year arc executed. I think by the end of this 3-year arc, we have more momentum for a Magic story audience. It's hard to say whether we have a significantly larger Magic story audience, but like,
yeah, like only Wizards of the Coast knows that.
I wish they would share the information, because I can tell from my site based on like interest patterns and stuff how many people are going to the thing. However, it's hard because some people just take a long time to read stories. there are people catching up on Duskmourn's story right now. Assuredly, there are people catching up on Bloomburrow's story because they're restarting with specifically Tarkir, and maybe they're off put by the previous two, but not by that first one. So, yeah, I think more on-ramps at every single level is my current solution, and stuff like Quick Start Guide, I can always do that, but there's many problems to be solved, and I love it as a hobby, because this is like my fucking Magic deck building. It's like, how do you actually translate these people's interest or curiosity about this thing into something that's actionable and results in like them being my best friend because they love Magic story. like it just truly is a more enjoyable thing when you get people together to do it rather than solitary Magic story reading experience. You see people freak out about that Jace finale. You know how it is.
Yep, exactly. Freak out about the Jace finale, freak out what happens afterwards, get to speculate about what's going on. Yeah, it's all so much more fun if you have anyone to talk to about it.
Yeah. And also that community aspect is another thing. Is there is that community aspect necessarily adequately supported by the Magic official Discord server? Is it being supported by other fan Discord servers? Is it being supported in any other non-Discord environment like Reddit or any old forums? Like, it's hard to get people into it when they feel otherwise so disconnected, and the social media shattering does not help. I have so many Magic Story friends who just dropped off the face with Twitter and never joined Blue Sky, or I know that they're on Mastodon, but I don't feel like updating a Mastodon in addition to my thing to necessarily keep in contact with 3 people who are otherwise absent from Blue Sky when I can just like hope that they join Blue Sky eventually. But yeah.
Yep. Here's hoping that people can kind of get back around, get back into it. We can find people. We can hopefully try to find everyone, get them all on whatever social media platform.
I know you're a Blue Sky hater. You don't have to hide it. We're Rizless, as you say.
Blue Sky's fine.
It is a perfectly adequate social media site for now, but it really does pose a problem when it's like your most enthusiastic story voices could have reached even more people on Twitter if the momentum would have stayed there. But that's like outside of our control.
Yep.
Sucks.
Yep. So, Cary, I think we've covered just about everything possible we can in under an hour.
That was all the Magic Story, all the history.
So there you go, everyone. Now you know everything you need to know about Magic the Gathering story. No, it is truly a wicked problem. But, Cary, I'm glad there are people like you chipping away at trying to solve it.
Yeah. I don't have all of the answers. I have a handful of answers and so much other spaghetti I've thrown at the wall that has sucked. So if people have suggestions, I'm wide open on Blue Sky.
Definitely. I will send as many people as I can your way. And Cary, I need to submit I need to submit something to the contact form on mtglore.com.
Oh, there's no contact.
Just message you on Blue Sky. That's what it is. All right. I was looking for the quick start guides, but they're not actually linked anywhere.
Oh yeah, I've got to put those in the resources tab. I'll have that in there by the time this airs.
Cary, I think that's about all the time we got. But before we go, I will have 2 more questions for you. One, I'm going to pick your brain about your hobbies outside of Magic the Gathering. Obviously, we share connections through Magic the Gathering, but I love to hear from people what else they're interested in. That'll be over on the Patreon. And as always, the last question is, do you have anything else to leave the listeners of the Herald's Horn with before we go?
No, I don't think I've had this much power before. Can I say roll the theme?
Yeah.
Okay, it rolled now. There we go.
Cary, thank you so much for joining me here on the Herald's Horn.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone at home for listening. Bye-bye.